Thank you for joining me. I'd like to just say a few things about this encore course that is going to be offered this term. We filmed it live last spring in 6 sessions, and really what this is about is it's the course title, Great Cities, Capitals of Western History. And in a certain way, you could say these great cities were kind of like the centers of innovation as Western civilization evolved. They were sort of the places where the changes happened the most, and changes happened first. And so each of these cities, what we're doing is that with our 6 cities, we're going to be focusing not kind of trying to cover the whole range of the history of each of these cities, but much more focusing on each of these cities during their golden age, during the time when really they were the leading city in the Western world. So we begin in this way with Venice, and Venice becoming the great maritime power that brought goods from the Orient into Europe. It became the wealthiest city in the world. And also connected with that, it was a cultural center. And this is true of each of these cities. So when we're going to be talking about Venice, we'll be talking about Titian and Tintoretto and Veronese, who were the great artists at that time. But there is a kind of a sequence with these cities, which is that these power capitals, these capitals of Western history, there was kind of a one would rise and then go into decline as another city rose. So as Venice begins going into decline, really it's in the age of exploration. And at that time, that is when Spain becomes the great power. And it's the golden age of Spain. And at the center of that was Madrid. This is where the royal court was, where a lot of the wealth and resources from an entire continent flows into Spain, into Madrid. And also, Madrid was also a religious center in the sense that this is the time period of the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation. Well, the Counter-Reformation was really organized not so much from Rome as from Madrid. And so we'll begin covering that also. And then as Madrid goes into decline, on the rise was Amsterdam. So in the 1600s, 17th century, it was a period of time when there were difficult economic times. It was a time of a lot of warfare in Europe. And so, but it's right at this time when everywhere else was having great difficulties. This is when it was the time of the Dutch Golden Age. And Amsterdam was at the center of that, where the Dutch became the great commercial power, with extending colonies out throughout the world. and then as we move forward, the Dutch kind of go into decline, and there is the time period of the Enlightenment and the French Revolution, kind of the trauma of the French Revolution, and sort of at the end of the Napoleonic Wars, the power that arises is the Habsburg Austrian Empire. And the center of that was Vienna, and kind of emblematic of Vienna's status as European capital. It was at the Congress of Vienna that was held at the end of the Napoleonic Wars. And it really kind of set the political agenda in Europe for the first half of that 19th century, and which is often known as the Age of Metternich, who was the Habsburg foreign minister at that time, who was kind of the architect of, of the Congress of Vienna. And then when we get to the latter part of the century, it's really it's in the time period when the Industrial Revolution starts, really the effects, the fruits of it really start showing. And where it manifests most is in London. Britain becomes the most powerful and most wealthy country, and London is very much at the center of that. And London is also the beneficiary of all that resources and wealth from the British Empire, the worldwide. And in many ways, you could say that London was the first world capital because of that world, that far-flung empire that they had. What is the line? The sun never sets on the British Empire, and so Europe was at the center of Western civilization. But really, things shift after the catastrophe, after the crises of World War I and World War II. Europe kind of goes into decline, and then it's a continental power that arises, the United States. And the capital of the United States, not politically, but in terms of economic activity, in terms of energy, in terms of sort of setting a tone, it was New York City. And New York City is really kind of the first modern city. It's sort of the city that looks like what we think of as a modern city, with the skyscrapers and the extensive subway system, and also all that energy that came in. I mean, to make a contrast with London, London had a huge population rise in the 19th century, but almost all that population rise, it was coming from the British Isles. In contrast with New York, with a huge growth of population, becoming the most populous city the world had ever seen, it was people coming from all over, mostly from Europe, but all over the continent. And so there was a kind of special energy in New York. And so as I say, what we're going to be doing is going through these cities, the chronology. And I want to say something that there are two things I want to say. One is that I would recommend, you're going to be getting, the way things will work with these encore classes is you'll be getting them all at the beginning of the term. However, there's a lot of material with each one of these. And something I would really recommend is that you space it out a little bit. Maybe this was a 6-week course. Every Thursday afternoon from 1 to 3, we would gather. This course, the class sessions would take place. And I would recommend sort of something like that, picking a day and a time, and a time when you can sort of have a glass of wine or brew some special tea, and have it be almost like maybe a little bit like a ritual, so that I think you'll get more out of it that way. And something also I want to say is there's also something that's being offered with this encore classes is 2 live sessions. So halfway through the term, and then there'll be another one at the end. There'll be really kind of discussion center sessions for an hour. So there's going to be one February 12th, one on March 12th. And so that'll be an opportunity for us to talk about some things, for people to pose questions, and just kind of have a little bit of a freewheeling discussion of some of these cities, and maybe talking about some of the dynamics of how the cities related to one another. So I welcome you to great cities. I feel like I'm a little bit of the host of these cities, and so I hope you can join me through this, for this virtual visits to these great cities in their golden age.